Welcome to episode number 19. I'm your host, Dan Lindsay. This week I have Joe Chasson in to talk many things at WWE, but we especially take time to get his expert analysis on none other than the self-proclaimed best in the world. And honestly, when it comes to the mic skills for the Second City Saint, very few are able to stay toe-to-toe with him, but more on him later with Joe later on in this podcast. On the NASCAR side today, we talk about arguably the best driver in the world, Kyle Larson. He's definitely proving to be the best so far this season among all drivers, and he's constantly being brought up in the conversation for greatest driver on earth due to the fact that he can adapt to any type of car out there. He's even attempting the famed Memorial Day double with the Indy 500 and World 600 on Memorial Day weekend. Since the interview with Joe is a little lengthy, we're going to do the NASCAR portion today like we're at North Wilkesboro and make it short. So there's not many holes to poke in the game of Kyle Larson so far this season. He has the most top 10s so far this season with 9, and the most top 5s this season with 8. There's one guy in that list that's right behind him though, Christopher Bell. Christopher Bell has 8 top 10s and 6 top 5s. So pretty close neck and neck there, but Kyle Larson still more than Christopher Bell. They are both, however, tied for the most wins in the season so far with 3 apiece, and there's only one other multi-win driver so far this year, that is Denny Hamlin. But we got to dive a little bit deeper to kind of really show how Kyle Larson is doing on the track this season. Because once Kyle Larson gets the lead, he rarely lets it go. He's already led 817 laps this season, more than twice as much as teammate William Byron, who hasn't even crossed the 400 laps led mark yet. Only one other driver has at least 300 laps led this season. That's none other than Denny Hamlin. Since his lone DNF at Darlington, Kyle Larson has scored at least 50 points in 4 straight races, including 60 at Bristol and 61 at Kansas, maxing out the most possible points by winning both stages at each of those races. In the 3 races that Larson didn't nab a top 10 this year, he finished 20th at Daytona, 32nd at COTA, and the DNF at Darlington. When we break down the ARP by race phase of non-drafting ovals, meaning this doesn't include Daytona, Talladega, Atlanta, and COTA, Larson looks even better thanks to this graphic made by Daniel Cespedes. Make sure you go follow him on X. He's a great follow with any kind of stat you can think of with NASCAR. So with this graphic, when we're looking at non-drafting ovals, Larson is bested in the starting position by just one person, his teammate, William Byron. And moving into the next part of the table, Kyle doesn't dominate stage 1 of these tracks, but he's right there with teammates Byron and Alex Bowman, as well as the Penske duo of Austin Cindric and Josh Berry. Stage 1 is very interesting to me here as the top 15 average running position is all dominated by guys that are either locked into playoff spots with wins or should have no problem locking their playoff position. I'm keeping my eye out on number 45 there, Tyler Reddick. He might be quietly having one of the best seasons, and we're not even talking about him. As we look at stage 2 and 3 here for average running position on these non-drafting oval tracks, Larson is head and shoulders above the drivers in stage 2, with that next group including big names like Denny Hamlin, Ryan Blaney, Tyler Reddick again, and William Byron. But again, Kyle Larson above that group even. Stage 3 average running position, Larson is extremely high here as we see, but Denny Hamlin is right there too with him on those non-drafting ovals. Blaney, despite 4 DNFs this season, is right there too with a big gap to both Christopher Bell and Tyler Reddick before it gets really muddled and clustered again in the middle. And in the best finishes category, it's pretty simple. Larson and Bell, they both have 3 wins and the most top 5, so it's relative to the rest of the field, so they're obviously going to be higher mark than the rest of the field there. And one more thing to show Kyle Larson's domination here, I have to bring up this tweet from Seth to showcase just how good he is at leading the race. Larson crossed a 10,000 laps led mark this week at Kansas for his whole career. Nearly 7,000 of those laps led all came at Hendrick. And when we look back into this year, 411 of those laps came at Bristol with his second tweet. Now, I find it very interesting that Seth points out that Austin Dillon has been in NASCAR for roughly the same number of seasons as Kyle Larson, but while Kyle Larson led 401 laps at Bristol, Dillon has led just 412 laps his entire career. Again, just showing how good and smooth Kyle Larson is. Next week, we'll dive into some of the drivers I think could give Larson a run for his money for the championship this season. So stay tuned for that. So with the circuit complete for this week, it's time to hit the ring. Over the next few weeks, I'll be bringing back some familiar faces, just to talk a little bit of the state of WWE, so to speak, and some other poignant topics with each of these guys. This week is my friend and former colleague, Joe Chasson. So let's welcome Joe back onto the show. All right, and now to the wrestling side of the podcast, I welcome back Joe Chasson. Joe, thanks for joining me this week. Really appreciate having you here. We've got a lot of topics we'll kind of hit on today, but most of all, I'm looking forward to your thoughts on your man, CM Punk. That's kind of where our discussions really started with me and you kind of talking about doing this together. So definitely want to get kind of more in the heart of CM Punk. You know, I know you're a big fan of him, so we'll definitely get to a lot of him later here in our discussion. But let's start off with Backlash. Personally, I thought the card was pretty good from top to bottom. What kind of impression did you get from Backlash?
First of all, Daniel, thank you very much for having me once again. It's always a pleasure. And I don't prefer fan. It's expert analysis.
There we go. Yes. Got to correct that. Yes.
Backlash was good. So first impressions was it felt very subdued. It didn't have a big time pay-per-view feel, which it isn't anyways. I keep saying pay-per-view, PLE, same thing.
It's a difference. Yep.
And, it's no Survivor Series. It's no Rumble. It's no SummerSlam. But it's been a staple for a while. It was nice when they brought it back a few years ago after not having it for a little while. But nonetheless, it was fun. Good show. It felt like it went by pretty quick. There was only 5 matches on it, I think, which felt light. I could be wrong. It just feels like there's always more, or maybe it was the stipulations for each match and the rivalries for some of the matches weren't as hot. And it is, of course, by name, the Backlash of Mania. So you're starting to go a little bit on the, not decline is the word I'm looking for, but you're coasting a little post-Mania. The dust is still settling, and I'm sure everyone from top to bottom, crew, talent, writing is on a little bit of a break post-Mania. But it was fun. It was a good show. I mean, I was mostly excited, I think, like everybody else, for Cena and Orton. It was the pure nostalgia of it. You knew there was going to be a good match. There wasn't much of a storyline going into it because you don't really need one just because it was Orton and Cena. But it felt a little subdued. There was no fancy set. There was no, big grand type. Just felt very subdued. But it was good. It was good pay-per-view. I enjoyed it. And of course, Cena and Orton didn't disappoint. And I'm sure we'll get more into that as we go along. But those are my first thoughts about Backlash.
Yeah. No, I like your note of being subdued there. It definitely did have more of a feel of like a Saturday Night Main Event or like the Netflix on Raw, to where you had good matches. I felt it was good matches top to bottom from the card. But yeah, I kind of get your subdued feeling. I feel like outside of your major PLEs, like SummerSlam, Mania, Rumble, even actually Rumble, I think this year only had like 3 or 4 extra matches outside of the 2 Rumble matches. But I feel like outside of like your 2-night events, and I'm curious to see what Money in the Bank will shake out to be. I feel like five matches is kind of the standard, but yeah, it still did feel kind of quick. I was texting with a couple of the other guys that we with Chris and Tyler, and I was kind of like, this is over quickly. I wasn't complaining because it's nice to have it start at 7 and know that you're done by 10:30, 11. I mean, that's right. That's not really too bad of a night. But yeah, I do get your feeling of like that was that was kind of it did feel quick, but I still felt it was good. It was good. 3 weeks later, we got a lot of PLEs coming up over the next 2 months. I feel like we have one like almost every other week, between what we have with a couple Saturday Night main events, Money in the Bank. I know we got something else coming up, a possible Evolution 2. They haven't officially announced that, but it sounds like they're so close to announcing that. So, I
Yeah,
expect.
I just saw that on an Evolution on. It wasn't a WWE site. It was like just a third party site that tracks pay-per-view schedules for AEW and WWE, and I
Mhm.
saw that on there. The only reason it stood out was, to your point, I don't think it's fully announced, but seemingly it had Connecticut as the location. So
Gotcha,
that was
gotcha.
a little interesting. I don't know if that's confirmed, or I don't know if that's just based on rumors, but
I feel like I came across something the other day too, and I don't remember where I saw it, but it feels like a lot of the um, extracurricular stuff that they set up, like meet and greets, Undertaker show and stuff like that. I don't think that was for that weekend, but all the extra stuff have been seeming to kind of be put in place. But yeah, it doesn't seem like it's been. Everything's around. I think the one thing I saw, and I wish I could remember this, where I saw this was they might do Evolution on a Sunday because it might be the same weekend of a Saturday night's main event. So I'm very, very curious to see what they do. But I'm looking forward to actually having another women's all women PLE. I think I wish they'd have worked that into the rotation. Like every other year since they did that. I honestly forget the first year of it. It was like 2018, 19. I think it
yeah, I
was.
want to say 18. It was in the window of time when I wasn't watching.
Mm.
I don't think I'm the first wrestling fan to say this. You kind of go in and out of
Yep.
watching, and mine was like 2007 through like 2012, and then I just didn't watch. I think I like still followed it. Like it wasn't like I was totally, I knew the Shield and all that stuff, but then
Right.
I really started tuning back in like late 2019. And I
Hmm.
remember like seeing highlights of that being like, oh, that's cool. They had an all women's pay-per-view. And it was definitely long overdue. And it was definitely to this point, I mean, it's pretty historic. It's pretty much set the tone for the last, 6, 7 years for the women's division and it's seemingly the whole industry, not just the WWE.
Yeah, no, that's a great point there. For the whole industry for sure, because now we're just seeing it's like everybody's comparing who's got the better women's division, and I feel like
Right.
this will be the WWE's chances. Like, hey, look, we have it, and I wouldn't be hopefully we get like a few decent call ups, official call ups from NXT
Right.
beyond just the possible Julia and assumedly Roxanne. Um,
Right.
but speaking of NXT call ups, Lyra and Becky. Let's talk about some of the matches from Backlash. Lyra and Becky,
Sure.
I thought was probably maybe the standout match to me, on that match on the card. Any standout matches for you?
Yeah, so that one definitely stood out because, and the way I'm going to describe it is going to sound like it wasn't a good match, but it was. So to me, that was one of those matches where it's far from the first time I've seen a match like that, where the first couple minutes, like 5 minute, 10 minute mark, I wasn't blown away. It was
Hmm.
enjoyable, and it was a PLE match, but it was one of those matches, and maybe you've experienced the same where you're invested, you're definitely watching it, and it doesn't quite grip you, but then 10 minutes becomes 15, 15 becomes 20. It was probably like a 20-minute, maybe 22-minute match if I were to guess, and it's one of those matches where time is the reason you start to get impressed. At like the
Hmm.
halfway point, you just sort of catch yourself saying to yourself, this thing's still going. You lose track of time a little bit, and then you
Yeah.
start to get impressed that it is still going. So it wasn't like this amazing spectacle match by any. Told the story very well. But yeah, it was a fun match. The rivalry they have going is interesting. I really hope it's a way they can elevate. Um, uh, Drawing a blank now, not Becky, but
Lyra.
Valkyrie.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's a great way to do it. I mean, when you have someone like Becky, have a million analogies. Late in her career, not much else to do. They turned her heel for a reason,
Hmm.
to elevate other talent, and seemingly that's exactly what she's been doing. But it's the angle they've been going with it on Monday. The promo she cut Monday was interesting. I've always liked Becky as a heel. I mean, she's one of those superstars. It's rare, right? You like them just as much as a heel as you do a face, just because you
Right.
like seeing them on screen. So it doesn't really
Hmm.
matter how they're presented. Um, it's much harder to be a face in some regards. It's harder to make people like you for a long period of time. I mean,
Yeah.
Cody Rhodes is going through it right now, and Becky seemingly has mastered it because she's been around in that environment so much longer that, you know, she can do it, and she's doing it really well. So I enjoyed that match. I really did.
Yeah, no, I thought it was great. I think you described it perfectly. You know, it's like you're watching it, it's like, oh, there's a big move, there's another big move. And I didn't expect Lyra to actually win that. I figured Becky was gonna win, or we were gonna get some kind of run in from Bailey. So I'm kind of glad that they kind of kept it on Lyra. I think it needs to be. You know, she's the inaugural champion. Let's give her a good run. You know, I would have said the same thing about Chelsea, but you know, they just took that, you know, that secondary title off of her. But you know, let's give these, you know, these secondary titles are new. Let's, you know, let's give them a good run. Let's, you know, put them in a good position. Becky will help that. I think Bailey eventually coming back will help that. You know, I think it was good too. I have to ask you, and we'll get to Orton and Cena, but Gunther and Pat McAfee. That was a comical match for me. I enjoyed it, what came of it, how it ended, but that was a comical match if you ask me.
Yeah, it was definitely it was interesting. You know, me and Tyler were talking about it last week. I won't get into the weeds of it, but the you know, a big thing they did at Mania is they took a risk, right? So between night one and night two, your biggest heel and your biggest face, Gunther and Rhodes, lost. And not only lost, but Gunther lost in a modern day squash, basically, is what it felt like. And they went with the underdog angle, with before, and it's great. It's always kind of fun. And you know, you just kind of wait and see what happens to see if it really pays off. So far, so good. You know, they've made it worth Jay and where he's going to end up going. And with Rhodes, you know, he's taking a break, and you just hope that when he comes back, he gets a really big pop, and it makes it all the worthwhile that he goes away. The reason I say that is because, you know, with the Gunther thing, at face value on paper, it's interesting that they took the route of, okay, you know, top heel. He's been a champ like 80% of the time in his run here. We're going to bring him down a peg. He just lost. He's humiliated. He tapped out. Let's put him up against Pat McAfee. So it's a little weird if you're trying to build him back up. It's no disrespect on McAfee, but it's like the equivalent of, I think I said this too, Tyler. It's like the equivalent of '07 Orton losing a title, then facing Jerry the King Lawler at a pay-per-view. Like, it's just
Yeah.
a little gimmicky, silly. Like, it, in theory, if you really wanted to boost his character, you annihilate McAfee. Like there's no chance that this commentator would even hold a chance. And he really didn't. If you go back and watch it, he had his moments,
Right.
but he got the crap he got out of him, and was really what happened. There were flares of excitement, but he didn't stand a chance. And they presented it really well, where they still made it fun, but there was a moment you thought maybe McAfee could win, but in reality,
Yes.
you're like, nah, he's getting the snot kicked out of him. It was fun match. You know, everyone likes to see McAfee. I liked it for that reason. Anytime Pat gets a chance to wrestle, it's just it's kind of like he's like hovering right on the line of like Bad Bunny, you know, things like that, where it's like a celebrity, but he clearly enjoys the business.
Yeah.
For Gunther's sake, I mean, you know, they've already rolled right over it. It's as if it didn't even happen. Like, he's already on to his next thing. Yep. So it does make you wonder why they did it per se exactly. You know, it's fun. It was, you know, I hope he's already seemingly back on track to that main event, you know, world heavyweight title picture. So.
Yeah, I kind of hope they would put a couple extra roadblocks in front of Gunther to get back to that. You know, not many, obviously, but you know, and time will tell. We obviously, you know, I have no idea if this is official or not, but it already sounds like whoever wins. I mean, I'm fairly certain we'll see Jay win at Saturday night's main event here in about a little over a week. But you know, whomever wins, when Jay wins that match, you know, it sounds like we're going to get the Gunther Jay rematch at Money in the Bank, because Gunther on Monday was like, "I'm coming back after whoever wins that." So it's like, well, Money in the Bank is pretty much right after Saturday night's main event. So unless they want to somehow tease it out to SummerSlam or something, you know, but you know,
and they already, you know, and it's a different storyline, but also with not at the same time, you know, Seth is challenging for the title too, so it makes you wonder Well, he already did, but you assume that isn't over yet.
Right. Yeah. That
So
what's
you kind of
DQ
wonder,
finish. Yeah. Yeah.
right? So you wonder how they're going to kind of tie all that in together.
Yeah. No, yeah. Before we actually get to Rollins stuff too, you brought up Orton. I almost said CM Punk. You brought up Orton and John Cena. What are some quick thoughts from you on that match?
Yeah. So the thing that stood out to me, and I remember, I'll tie this in. So I remember heading into Rhodes and Cena. It was Cena's, not his first appearance as a heel, but his first match as a heel.
Mm-hmm.
And, the big question that I had that I didn't notice a lot of people talk about, maybe it's just the excitement of it kind of drowned out any other miscellaneous thoughts. But a lot of Cena's moves, his move set, revolve around face style presentation. The five knuckle shuffle. It's weird to envision a heel doing it. Just kind of his flow. The way he moves in the ring. And so I was thinking about that. And during Rhodes, it answered all my questions. He did slow it down. He purposely did a lot of those typical heel, step out of the ring, gather yourself, just
Right.
very heel things. So that being said, with Orton, it was interesting because Orton moves kind of slower anyways. You're used to face Cena versus heel Orton. So how are they going to change this up? The word disappointed is far from the truth. I'm not disappointed in the match. My only wish was, a big pull for it was just the match itself. Cena Orton won last time. That alone is going to make me watch it.
Right.
I wish it was more visually storytelling other than just a wrestling match. They did the moves, the RKO counter. I mean, Orton probably hit like 5 RKOs in that match to Cena alone.
At least, yeah, just to Cena. Yep.
And so I wish it was a little more memorable, I guess is the word. I mean, you're going to remember it anyways because it's roped into Cena's final tour. So that alone, you're like, oh yeah, I remember he faced Orton at Backlash. But it really wasn't an amazing match by any means. It was just cool because it was nostalgic, I think, which is fine. That's a lot of wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was fine. It wasn't amazing. There was no 5 stars on this card. And again, like, I'm fine with it just solely for the purpose that they went out of their way to do Orton Cena. They didn't have to. They waited till when he was in Missouri, and that was cool.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to go down the fantasy booking road, but it would be cool if you did Cena Punk at Money in the Bank if you're going down the road of nostalgia, because what better PLE than Money in the Bank to do that match? If you're going to go the next, 7-8 months, however many months are left in the year, and do those nostalgic matches, pick your spots. It was cool that they did it at Backlash. There's no real sentimental value to Backlash. I mean, they fought all the time in every pay-per-view, but it was cool that it was like you're going down the list. It's like, all right, WrestleMania over, Backlash, let's do Orton. And they're not always going to be nostalgic matches. You're not going to do the next 6 months of just, oh, remember they faced each other in 2009. It'd be cool to see him face guys he's never faced before.
Right,
and,
right.
that kind of mix him up a little bit. So.
Yeah, no, I definitely enjoyed that match. I think in total, I'd have to go back and count. I know, I want to say Orton hit at least 9 RKOs in total. Because all this and all the producers and came out. So I mean, I think that was 5 right there. There's at least 4, if not 5.
He technically hit one of the counters where it's an AA into one.
That was awesome. Move the match. Move the match with that.
Yeah,
one.
No, they definitely know their chemistry, right? I mean, these guys have been doing it so long. It's very similar to, hopefully they don't count this as the match, but that little sequence between Punk and Cena in the chamber, where they were the 2. That was the same thing. It was like, oh my God, what a blast from the past. These guys clearly are professionals. They know each other really well.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like that most of the match. It's really all you could ask for, because like, it's no one's fault, but sometimes wrestling's just like this. You knew Orton wasn't gonna win, right? Like it didn't make sense. It just would be so. Unfortunately, that was not on their side, where you have one of those matches where you genuinely don't know who's gonna win. because no matter how many RKOs he hit, you knew, and plus two, I mean, it's the oldest rule in the book, right? Once the ref goes down, what, you know what I mean? Like, what's going to happen? Did you see I never know if it's like canon or not. I guess it technically is, and they've been utilizing them a lot more. Did you see the press conference with Cena
Yes.
afterwards?
And honestly, I take anything that we see on WWE programming or socials, that's canon. That's can be referred to. That could possibly be referred to at any point. Like literally everything counts. I don't know if you listen to Sam Roberts a lot, but that's one of his rules. Is like everything counts, and anything the WWE uses on any of their social channels, reels, press conferences, YouTube clips, whatever, that counts 100%. I mean, that's how we got the start of Cody and KO. You know, was the
I was just going to reference that. That was one of the coolest. No, not parking lot. Entrance ramp as the show was ending on a Saturday. And technically, what made that unique was that was never formally on a social media page for WWE.
Right.
I think they knew it would. Yeah, they knew it would go viral, and it wasn't an accident. It clearly was planned. So it's, frankly, you could name a million things, pros, cons, whatever. That aspect of programming is a signature of Triple H and not Vince. Like, obviously, Paul has taken a ton from Vince, logically, and like just the things that have existed for the last 100 years. But you could point to that type of stuff and be like, no, that's like a Triple H thing.
Yeah, no, he's definitely trying to move into the new age of technology. You know, everybody's like ratings are down, but it doesn't matter if ratings are down because we consume this stuff so much more. Like, I know if I don't get to see an episode of SmackDown, I can easily either go rewatch it or I can jump on Instagram. I follow 2 or 3 other reaction channels that are very good at what they do. You know, and it's like they'll post clips so I can get a gist of a lot of promos and matches, and then you can find the full matches or full segments on YouTube very easily, especially the more popular ones. So it's like we just consume it in such a different way to where, Chris Van Vliet has talked about that a lot on his podcast, where we consume such a different way now to where, ratings have something, they have some merit when you're on cable. But obviously we don't really know ratings what Netflix is because that's so different. So I think the way that Triple H and his team have brought us into this world of technology, and I feel like they're experimenting just to see what works. But a lot of stuff is working. But to your point, the press conference, that was great. I think that's, I wouldn't be surprised if we get an eventual match between those two now. That's kind of the rumor. Like, when do we see this? We need another quick matchup for Cena, with another PLE coming up here soon. I don't know if he's going to be on Saturday Night's Main Event and Money in the Bank, but I feel if you are doing both with Cena, you could easily slot in R-Truth right there in one of those so easily just because of the press conference, and that's great. We've never gotten that before.
Well, how great of an angle would it be? Again, I hate going down the fantasy booking avenue, but
I love to, so you won't get any complaints here.
A lot of the gimmick of Truth. I mean, Truth doesn't even really have a gimmick. He is a gimmick, right? That's what makes him so fun.
Yep.
Is the whole Cena thing, right? Over the years doing
childhood
his moves
hero,
and all that stuff. So how great would it be if you really hunkered down and took that and ran with it, and you saw a side of R-Truth come out for the first time, frankly, in his whole career, where he's vulnerable. He's not just a joke. And you truly show these moments over like, a 2 or 3 week window where he starts to hate him. He's like, this guy is a fraud. Like, he's not my hero. He's throwing away shirts and stuff, whatever. And then you do get that match. And, you see Truth, frankly, for what he is. They paint him as a gimmick. Obviously, we all know that. Mm-hmm. But the reality is Ron Killings, R-Truth, is a phenomenal wrestler. He was the first black NWA champion, probably 20 years ago by this point. He's a sensational wrestler. They just always used him as the mid-card, start of the show, what's up guy. It'd be cool to really take that and,
Yeah, no, that 100%. That'd be really neat. Just for him, it's the childhood hero thing, and you know, I I just want to see a confused R-Truth on SmackDown on Friday. That's I just want to see a very confused R-Truth. Like, what's up, man? Come on, dude. Like,
Right,
what was that for?
right.
I didn't. I decided, yeah. You could do so many things with that. So much, you know.
You know what we haven't even mentioned yet? We kind of skipped right over it between the match and the press conference is, and I guess I didn't really notice it till I went back and I saw it on Twitter and then I rewinded it. I wanted to see it for myself. They for the first time since turning heel, so we'll say I don't know, late February, whenever that happened. Cena had that look right when he's ringside
Mhm.
after the match when they're saying thank you, Cena, and he's like having what seemingly was this moment of like of doubt, right? Like, what have I done? Like, it felt like that. There's different ways you could interpret it, and it's
Mhm.
long-term storytelling, right? Like, all that really was to me was that first little plant. They might not expand on it for another 4 or 5 weeks, but it's that first. Because frankly, I don't think it's a hot take. I don't think he finishes this year as a heel. They turn him back maybe in the summer or the
Agreed.
fall,
Yep.
just so they can wrap up on what would be like a normal note, So he will turn back eventually, whatever. And that seemingly was that first seed of, it'll be a weird turn because he's gonna have to just apologize, I guess. Like, it's gonna
Yeah.
be a weird, So, but that was seemingly the first little storytelling plant that you saw, which is cool.
Yeah. No, agreed. And I think they kind of did that with the start of the presser too. Of where Cena's like, I'm evaluating how I do things, and I should respect the media and answer questions. And then our truth showed up, so we never. Because
Yeah,
I thought after Mania when he was like, oh, I forget the phrase now, but he was, oh, that's a clickbait question. Like that's how he was
right.
answering
It
everything.
was so anti-Cena. It was really, really interesting
It's
because
so
he
awesome.
usually
It was
is
awesome to me.
the most outspoken. He knows the reporters by name, and he, it still rings to me for some reason. It's he had a quote in one of those same press conferences after the Rumble, I think it was. So he loses, and that was when he kind of like he really hit a new gear where he was like, I'm gonna enter the chamber. I'm sick of losing. Like he had this like really like this determination, and he had this awesome little 3-minute monologue about being like just he was emotional kind of. It was great, and it ended up not really mattering because he turned heel the next month anyways.
Right.
But that was like what you felt like was going to set the tone for the next 12 months. Um, and then it just totally disappeared. But like he's so
Yeah.
like in a world where he technically he's on his way out and these press conference styles are on their way in, he's like the best at it and he's not even going to be a part of it.
Yeah, yeah, and honestly, I think we could even go back to that conference after the Rumble and say that was almost the start of his heel turn. It's just that the trigger got pulled at Chamber, but yeah,
Right,
I think you could even
right.
argue it's like his attitude there was like we should have seen this coming because of his attitude after Rumble, but yeah. Um, well, you want to keep talking Backlash, or you want to pivot to some other stuff? I don't know if there's any other matches you wanted to touch on with Backlash.
I got to refresh my memory now.
Because we had
So
the Fatal
Becky,
4-Way with
Orton.
Jacob and
Oh,
Damian,
that's right.
Drew, and LA
Drew.
Knight.
Yep.
Um,
That no, we can get into that. I mean, it's not like anything worthwhile talking about. It was a good Fatal 4-Way, right? Fatal
yeah,
4-Ways to me, in my opinion, they're either really good or they're really bad. There is no middle ground. They're a really weird dynamic. It never slowed down. It was
right.
from the get go. It was hot. It wasn't the longest match in the world, but sometimes that's better that way instead of dragging them out. Because the funniest thing always, no matter how big of a wrestling fan you are, the funniest thing that always creeps into your head when you're watching a Fatal 4-Way is you always, when you're watching wrestling, have this suspension of disbelief, right? It's like watching a movie. You just always have
Right.
it.
Yep.
We're so numb to it at this point. The funniest things that happen during a Fatal 4-Way is you're like, what are the other two doing? That happens a
Right.
lot. And sure enough, that happened with that match. Seemingly the highlight, that what they wanted, I think they were they were gauging the crowd. Fatal four ways are a good way to gauge future matches because the way the crowd reacts to certain spots. And Drew and Jacob, when they kind of went face to face for the first time, it was clear that the production team wanted to get something out of it. They were almost like polling. They were like, "Do you guys like this? Like, is this cool?" Jacob is a freak. I mean, he clearly is. I'm not going to say the future, but he has a big future ahead of him.
Yeah.
LA Knight, you knew he was kind of Canton fodder to some degree. He's great, but you just knew he probably wasn't going to win that match.
Right.
And who was the fourth? Who are we missing? LA, Jacob.
Damian Priest.
Damian Priest, yeah. So, and what that match did was answer a separate question. Seemingly, Drew and Damian, that rivalry's still going. They knocked themselves out of the match. Big spot. That was probably the biggest spot of the night, honestly. That table.
Yeah. And that was a big spot. Yeah, no, I'm with you there. Yeah, I think I know many of us, because when we did the preview pods, before Mania, I think a lot of us were all thinking Drew, Damian, they're going to finish this at Mania and go separate ways. And I guess not. I guess we were all wrong there, which is fine. Because, I think they're both great foils for each other. And, speaking of Drew, Drew since basically Rumble of 2024, has this been another level. He's always been good. He's always been a force, but he's an excellent social media troll. But he's such a presence in the in ring. His biceps and shoulders, they're bigger than my head. I feel he's so huge. But he's so much fun to watch.
He's an interesting character. He's interesting. So to your point, right? So 2024, he was red hot, and obviously a lot of that was, you could make the argument, Punk and him was rivalry of the year. They put on awesome matches. They stretched it over basically 12 months, maybe 8-9 months. And it was great. And, I do feel like they are at a point, specifically with SmackDown. So because Cena's a part-timer, because the heavyweight title's on Raw, SmackDown's in this weird limbo phase where a lot of great talent, but minimal direction, minimal concrete stories. And frankly, it's not really his fault, but Drew is in that category where, okay, Punk rivalry is over. Now it's Seth Rollins and Punk. What do we do with Drew? It's just that weird kind of gray area. Because he is an elite talent. The way I describe Drew is in a locker room right now filled with elite talent. A caliber guys. So it's right off without even thinking about it, it's Cena, Rhodes, Roman, Punk, Gunther. These top guys. Drew is always the B+ student, where he's clearly in the upper 2%, but he's never in that 1%. He's never. I don't know if he can draw money like that. I don't know if at SummerSlam he would be a main event. You know what I mean? Nothing against Drew. It's just it's a crowded locker room, and there's only so much to go around, and he always seems to get the short end of the stick. You could put him in matches that are really good. You put him with Sheamus, it'll be a 5-star match. Gunther, 5-star match. Priest, he could have a great rivalry with. But he's a weird kind of guy. I feel like he would be perfect. It's not to say I hope he goes there. AEW, he would be an amazing fit in that locker room. So it's weird. He's always just sort of in flux almost.
Yeah, no, he's definitely always in that always at the bottom or near that top echelon. But I think that helps I think that's what helps his personality, so his character so much is I'm always a guy that gets the short end. It's I'm going to prove that I'm not. So I think that feeds his character more. And he's such a great heel for it. So when a program that's not around a title comes along, like Punk last year, he's great. And it kind of even was around the title, but it was title adjacent. And I think honestly, I think Drew and LA Knight would probably be in the Universal title picture if it wasn't for Cena right now. I think those guys could, easily be. I could argue Damian and even Jacob, but too soon for Jacob. But since Damian actually did hold the World Heavyweight Championship for a little bit, I could argue that. But just overall LA Knight and Drew for sure, but because we have Cena, but I think that then helps out the United States Championship to where now that that title's always been kind of the stepchild of the men's titles in a way. I mean,
Right.
great guys have held it. Off the top of my head, I know Roman's held it a few times. A lot of the Shield early of the Shield breaking up, a lot of those guys held it. They obviously had Logan hold it. Style. I think. Cena obviously, famously held its open challenges with it. So I mean, it's not like a forgotten title, but I feel like these guys can maybe really just elevate that into like, hey, we all want this title, But yeah, no, Drew and Damian, I'm guessing we get at least one, maybe two more matches out of that. Drew won the number one contendership for the U.S. title, and then got placed in the Fatal 4-Way for no reason. So I'm hoping we get an explanation for that. I'm hoping we, because we never did. Drew was just off 1 week, and Nick was like, "Hey, we're doing a Fatal 4-Way next week or in 2 weeks or whatever," right. And it's kind of like, and it's like Drew has a legitimate beef, so it's like, I don't know. Maybe
my
they're kind of like
that. I think it's like, my hope is that. So to your point, we have, there's it's titles galore, right? I won't go down this rabbit hole. There's almost, you could make the case, too many titles. AEW is even worse than WWE, but nonetheless, if you can find a way to elevate them, then all the merrier. My hope is that when Cena retires, they'll, whether it's vacated or whatever, we'll say 2026 onward, then my hope is that you open the floodgates for that title where, I've said it before on previous shows that we've done. The reality is from 2020 onward, there's really three guys that have held the title. Yep. I mean, there's guys woven in along the way, but it's Brock Lesnar, Cody Rhodes, and Roman Reigns. Yep. And that's, you're talking like 5 years. 2019, you could say 6 years. It's a long time, and it's clearly they've taken a different route. When I was growing up in 2008, 2009, they had title changes once a month. There's no right or wrong. It's just a different, ebbs and flows of. So my point is once you don't have a part-timer as the world champion, you could see the Kevin Owens of the world, Finn Balor, AJ Styles, Drew McIntyre, guys that clearly have earned that title, right, haven't had it in 6, 7, 8 years, and then get it. If you do cycle 3-4 months, it'd just be nice to have these guys that we all know. They're all main event guys. They're fan favorites. They just have title solely because they've just stuck to these three guys. Whether that's right or wrong, who cares? I've enjoyed it. Roman having it for a long time was great. Brock, the ultimate final boss. I know that's Rock thing, but I was always mad about that. I always thought Brock was like the actual final boss.
Right?
You know what I mean? Like, they've done it well. It's not like I have any complaints, but it'd just be nice to have AJ Styles win it again, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Well, the last match that we haven't talked about on the Backlash card was honestly probably the match I was least invested in personally. Was Dominic and Penta. So I mean, if you had any thoughts you wanted to share there, like I said, I was personally not super invested in it. I still don't care. I still don't understand or / care for Dominic as the IC champion right now. He's doing fine with it and he's being a good heel, but the crowd's cheering him now, and I'm just like very confused watching this, and I'm just like, we know he's not losing this because he's got all of Judgment Day behind him.
So, Eagles, right? So Dominic's interesting. Early on in his career, not early on, like when he was with Rey Mysterio, we'll say the last year, so hot that even when he put the mic up, instant boos, right? It's no shame on him, no shade on him. It almost felt like the Jey Uso treatment where he wasn't actually that hated. It was manipulated hate, which is fine. It's pro wrestling. They can do what they want. So whether that was piping in some boos or alluding to, you should really hate this guy, it felt very manipulated. they really wanted that big boo, and whatever. Nonetheless, a reaction is a reaction. If you can't speak because the boos are so loud, you're doing something right. And then eventually, it just catches on. You just actually start to hate him. So that being said, when he actually won it and he got the cheers, part of me thought like they were just temporary because like you could make the case he's a face now. It still doesn't feel like that. It's not like he's getting this loud pop when he comes out. He's still attached to the Judgment Day. He's still a heel by definition. It was one of those things where I guess an analogy would be like a Chris Jericho, where we hate you so much that we actually are going to start cheering. Kind of like Roman, actually. Roman's a great example. He was a heel in the very beginning of his run, the first year, but then you come to realize you're like, dude, this dude is the tribal chief. Like, he's legit. He's actually so likable that we cheer him in a very ironic, weird kind of way. And I think he's kind of headed that way. Dom is not a specimen in the ring. He's not unbelievable. His matches are okay. They're fine. They're okay. Penta, on the other hand, is interesting where, I was first introduced to him in AEW and he was great. It wasn't like he was bad by any means. He's getting this WWE treatment where you're seen by way more people. We're going to present you in a different way. Like, you are shot out of a cannon. Like, frankly, I can't think of another superstar that debuted in WWE recently that has as much momentum as he does out
his
of the
brother.
yeah, maybe Ray Phoenix, right?
Which is crazy.
It was a fine match. It wasn't memorable. I'm not going to go back and rewatch it by any means. Frankly, you could make the case that Penta could be the IC champ just by the momentum that he has, but it's just two sides of the spectrum, right? It's momentum as a heel and momentum as a face, and they just went Dom, you could make the case, earned it. He's been around longer than Penta. That kind of aspect to it. So nothing memorable. I mean, it's cool. I like that he's the champ. It feels like really long-term storytelling. You're like, we got to give him some belt, right? He hasn't, other than tag team title, he hasn't had a belt yet. And to really validate a character, what better than the IC title, So he might not even have it that long. That seems to be the direction lately with the IC title. It feels like a lot of guys have had it in the last in the last year or so. So we'll see what happens. I mean, if you can elevate yourself. And the cool thing with Dom, right? I don't know if you can agree or not. I assume it's like an objective thing. He reminds you so much of Eddie, right? Physically, like the way he looks.
That
it's cool. Like, it's a really cool kind of throwbacky thing,
Yeah, he's really leaning into that. I like Uncle Eddie, not my dad. He's really leaning into cool. That. And I'm fine. I don't have like a like or dislike there. I think it's neat. I think it's cool. He does the Three Amigos from him. And Michael Cole loves it. Like, he stole that from Eddie. He stole that from Eddie. He stole the shimmy from Eddie. So I think that's kind of cool. Extra layer from Michael Cole there. I don't really have like a like or dislike of that. I think it's neat. I knew of Eddie. I've watched some of his matches, but wasn't really following wrestling at that time. To where it's like, I know who Eddie Guerrero is, but not much out of that. But it's cool to see. It's always neat for me to see people who pay homage to previous generations of wrestlers. Obviously, KO's very, been doing the stunner for a while now, so he's got that homage to Stone Cold and everything. And we've seen multiple others in different ways, paying homage to past generations of wrestlers. So it's neat for me, and maybe it's because he just looks like a dweeb. And it looks like, and he's a twig, and he doesn't have a physical presence. I'm like, how is this guy a champion? But that's where that suspension of disbelief.
I was in the same boat as you, where I wasn't watching wrestling when Eddie was active, right? So he died in like 05 or 04, and I was a few years after that. And frankly, what got me into him and like made me aware of his legacy was and it's not the first time it's happened where you become such a fan, you then become a savant, right? You're looking up history and the origins of things and the timeline of pro wrestling. It's impossible to tell the story of pro wrestling without mentioning Eddie Guerrero 2 or 3 times. And it was the way that other wrestlers talked about him in interviews that was like, oh, like this Eddie guy must be this kind of big deal, like I got to learn
Right.
more about him. And it's the Cenas and the Punks and these true students of the game that were like, oh, Eddie Guerrero. Like, I hate to bring it up, but like, same with Chris Benoit, right? Like, what he did was awful. It's like very
Right.
agreed upon. But at the same
Yep.
token, watch his highlights. Like, it's unbelievable some of the stuff he was doing with Eddie Guerrero, for that matter. The
Yep.
two of them put on incredible matches. So it's unfortunate, obviously, but
Right.
it makes you realize, like, wow, like, Eddie Guerrero is not a pioneer per se, but he was just a big deal,
Yeah. Yeah, he was I feel like he was one of the main staples on SmackDown early.
Totally.
So,
02, 03, 04. Yep.
Yep. Yeah, so I'm still kind of on the fence with Dominic, as far as the IC title run. I feel it's eventually going to lead to him and Finn, one of them leaving the Judgment Day and them fighting
Right.
over the title. Because I mean, we're starting, kind of like you were saying with Cena, with the look that he had. We've been getting little seeds here and there. He took his time getting a chair in the match to help out in the match. He didn't beat Styles like he said he was going to, stuff like that on Monday. And, so it's different things. I feel like it's interesting because you go back to when Triple H kind of took over creative, right? We really just had the Roman story, the start of the Bloodline story, and he had taken over, I think, just as Judgment Day was switching from Edge to Finn, I think, if I remember that correctly. But I feel
right,
like
more or less,
yeah. So I feel, right around that time. But I think if you look back, there weren't a lot of great storylines, right? In WWE at that time, there were some, but they weren't, obviously not what we have right now. But I feel, I lost my train of thought there. But I feel like Judgment Day has almost kind of been like that. It's almost been a longer, I don't think we're done with the Bloodline story. I think it's kind of a pause in a weird spot right now.
It just feels like the Judgment Day's been there just as long, but
yeah,
whether it's someone's fault, I'm glad you brought it up, because I was going to ask. In my opinion, it's not like it's a bad faction. It elevates Finn. It elevates. You have JD McDonough, who's a sensational talent, and they still haven't really let him off the leash yet, I feel like. So that's coming too. Carlito being there is cool for nostalgia reasons. You had the R-Truth fun. Rhea and Damian leaving, so you have different adaptations of it.
Right.
I can't help, at least recently, we'll just say 2025, right? We have enough sample size where it's about 5 months of 2025. It's just stagnant. Like, Finn is an unbelievable talent, and he's just been in this group just doing like tag team matches and like throwaway mid-card matches. And Finn Balor is like
so much
world
better.
renowned. Like
yes. World renowned
so
is perfect.
It's only a matter of time till it comes right. It's only a matter of time till it comes apart and they all go their own ways or whatever. Because frankly, it's but again, to your point, you mentioned Edge. It's so funny to think that's how it started. It feels like 10 years ago, and it wasn't even really that long ago.
Yeah, so I think we're going on. I think SummerSlam would make like 4 years, maybe 4.5.
Maybe 3, somewhere around there. Yeah, it's because you could track it to when Edge left. So it's whenever really he left, right around there, kind of.
Right. Yeah. Well. Because I mean, Well, even a little before, because it was Edge and Beth Phoenix. Him and his wife versus Rhea and Damian, or Rhea and Finn for a good bit there. But yeah, to me, it's interesting just to see how we basically have had 2 super long storytelling factions in the Bloodline and Judgment Day, and we've seen reiterations time over time going forward. And it's kind of like, but they've always been like, here's a little tidbit of when they might split. We're not actually going to pull that thread for another 3 or 4 months. So it's kind of like, that's where it's like with Dominic and Finn right now for me. It's like they've been laying little layers after little layers every 2 or 3 Mondays, and it's like, pull the trigger. But we know they will, but it's kind of like, as fans, I think some of us want, like, pull the trigger now. It's there. Do it. but it's like, yeah, not yet. But it's like you're saying, it's getting
Right,
borderline
exactly.
stagnant, so it's almost kind of like I feel like they need to pull that thread sooner than later.
Yep, agreed. Yep.
Let's move on to
Well, I think we've covered Backlash, right?
yeah, I think we've covered Backlash now. Let's move on to some other stuff that we want to talk about because we again want to talk some CM Punk with you. But after WrestleMania, we got a new faction: Paul Heyman, Seth Rollins, Bron Breakker. What are some of your initial thoughts of seeing these guys together now for a couple weeks post WrestleMania?
Yeah, so we're that's a good transition, right? We're going from one faction to another, and that's just the thing, right? Exactly that. The more and more I watch pro wrestling, which God, I don't even want to track the years at this point, but long enough where oh, one thing that's consistent, right? You're always going to have factions. It's an easy way to elevate people. It's an easy way to. They're always heels. Like whenever you have a face faction, it's just not. It's not a thing. It's part of the heel storytelling, and it's great. They've been around forever, and you've had some amazing ones over the years. So it's just the newest one, right? Like it's just the next one up. It's a thing that'll be around forever, seemingly, and it's old school, right? So you have the manager, you have the main guy, and you have kind of the muscle, right? It's only a matter of time till they add another guy, and they've already alluded to that. They're going to need one more for, unless I misinterpreted it, something coming up, right? Isn't there like a 3-on-3 or something? I know Zayn and Punk are at main event, but it just feels like they're going to add a third guy, and then it's going to be, well, who's that going to be, right? Then it becomes the guessing game and all that stuff. But it's old school, right? You can't hate it. It's the muscle and the main guy and the manager, and all three of them are awesome in their own way. Heyman's the best manager of all time. Rollins is a great frontman. Breakker, it's perfect. The guy that benefits the most is Breakker. He's still up and coming. They're putting him in the same category as Goldberg, Batista, that kind of thing. So it's great so far. It took a little bit to digest, but really the twist of Mania wasn't that Cena won. It was that Heyman chose Rollins over Roman and Punk. And, I mean, they've already done it a few times. Roman is pissed and he's going to get his revenge. They've already made it so that Punk is pissed. He wants his revenge. So it's pretty old school in that. But hey, don't fix what's not broken, right? So they're doing the old school. Between Zayn, Jay, and Punk, it's the three happy-go-lucky faces that have to join forces. And it's so in that regard, it's predictable, but wrong with it. So I'm curious, who that another member is going to be eventually. How long this faction even lasts. If the ultimate faction, right, is the main guy wins the title, right? It's the story of evolution. It's the story of legacy. It's like the main guy actually, you realize, doesn't care about the faction. He only cares about the gold kind of thing. So does that cost it? So there's a lot of different directions they can go in. So far, it's a cool faction. No complaints. The fact that it's going to be, Zayn and Punk versus Bron and Seth is cool. We're seeing him in action for the first time. All the momentum is with the faction because they're established, they're organized. It wouldn't show if they win that match because Zayn and Punk have never teamed together and they're distracted by the hatred they have for Rollins, So it'll be cool to see where they go with it.
Yeah, and Bron Breakker is just a massive bowling ball. Like he's just a massive wrecker. It's like on paper, there's no reason that Bron and Seth shouldn't win this match. And personally, and I definitely wanted to talk about that. So I'm very happy. I'm very happy you already went there because like I've been waiting to say that all night. Really, it's like when you have anybody's team that Bron is on, like that team should win. It's Bron Breakker. Like I find it interesting that we're kind of doing this faction, like you're saying, old school of you got the front man, you got the muscle. Where I feel like, I mean, Breakker held the IC title 2 different occasions, decent amount of time both times. and he did well with it. I think they're still kind of building that pool of players around. So I'm anytime like I like factions like the Bloodline, they had the Universal title or undisputed, undisputed title with Roman forever. Obviously, Usos had the tag titles. I always wish I would have put um, and then on another title on either Solo or Sammy, like the U.S. titles. Like they could have held all the gold. I think the Judgment Day briefly held. I think everybody held gold in the Judgment Day at one point. So I was like, why do they do that with the Bloodline anyway? But I feel like we could see that. That's kind of my hope. Let's get the IC title back on Bron. Let's get the World Heavyweight Championship on Seth. I think what's interesting is if you go back, probably a year and a half, 2 years ago, where I think they're kind of teasing members for the original Bloodline. They kind of, I think Roman and Braun might have had like an interaction when Braun was still on NXT, and Paul Heyman was like, very much of, yeah, your next kid or something like that. Very much in his corner, on his side. So I'm honestly curious if this is going to go the way. I think the faction is going to be short term. I wouldn't be surprised if it's dissolved by the end of the year, honestly, if not sooner. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Paul Heyman back Braun and be just like, Seth was just the means to an end here. I really don't care about Seth. It was just, that was my only way out of that rock and a hard place between CM Punk and Roman. So I went with option C, but I'm like, that was temporary because I really want Braun over here. Like, he is the next guy. So I think that's where it could go, obviously. And there's been a lot of names thrown around for that third person to possibly join. I've heard anywhere from Theory. I wouldn't be surprised if when Paul. I know Tyler's talked about Jay turning heel. Maybe they add Jay to it to kind of throw things off. I think it could go numerous ways. I don't know if you had any thoughts on who you would put in as that third person.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Whenever you think there's so many boxes you have to check for what makes sense, right? Like, your brain wants to throw in anyone, but then you start doubting yourself. You're like, well, it doesn't really make all that much sense for some reason. And this is without giving it too much thought. Drew makes a lot of sense to me only because he's, like we mentioned, not really doing too much other than a little side rivalry with Damian. It would be another kind of a plot twist. Out him and Seth are cool, and they're both with Paul Heyman. I think what people want to see, they alluded to it at the end of War. It was either War Games or the Chamber. I can't remember. Punk and Roman shaking hands, and they've even alluded to that they're not friendly, but they're on the same page where, yep, this guy screwed us over. I think they made the eye contact at the end of the Mania,
yep.
And then the following Monday night. So that would be interesting, right? You throw Roman in the mix somehow, maybe not in that faction, but he just becomes part of that storyline. Mm-hmm. But yeah, to your point, you could throw in a lot of different names. Theory, because he's a Heyman guy, or some up and coming guy. Right. That it's kind of the equivalent of throwing in Batista, right, in Evolution, because at the time Orton was still a nobody, but he was a little bit further than Batista was. I think he had already won an IC title or something like that. So even though Batista was the muscle, he was a nobody. He literally existed because of Evolution. So you could throw in someone who genuinely we have no idea about. Throw in Bronson Reed. He's been out. He's coming back soon. You could throw in that extra muscle in there just to give him some direction. There's a lot of different directions you could go, which is the coolest part about factions. It's kind of like an equivalent I can think of very loosely. It's not a full comparison, but in AEW, the big faction for faces right now is Samoa Joe and Shibata. And it was originally Hook, but he got hurt, I think, in real life. I think he was concussed or something. So they threw in a Powerhouse Hobbs, and they end up winning the trios title. Now it's a good problem to have, but you're like, what do? We can't just remove Hobbs. Hook's actually back in here. It was like a happy accident almost. So there's a lot of different ways you can go about it, and really there is no wrong answer. Like I don't think whoever they add, people will be like, oh, it's annoying or whatever. Add Ricky Starks. Who cares? You could have a million
It'd be
different
fun.
people.
Be fun. Yeah. Oh no. I think the names are. I think you could argue so many different people that aren't they're either doing something or they don't have a story right now. I think you could argue a lot of people. Maybe you added, and for all the bloodline hating that Seth has done, I kind of wonder, is he trying to form his own bloodline here? Will he add a tag team to
Right.
the stable? Because again, add a tag team, I don't know who you would add. I mean, I couldn't see someone like, that'd have to be like a tag team from NXT, I think. 'Cause you're not adding the New Day, you're not adding the War Raiders, because you're not turning them heel. So maybe they won't actually, maybe that's the one thing we can say. Probably won't add a tag team, but they could if they're trying to truly go with Seth has become what he hated.
Right. Exactly. That's the best part, right? There's no wrong answer. Is there's so many different things you could do, and the cool thing is they're already convincing enough. People already like Bron. They already like Seth and Paul. So no matter who you add, it's not like people are gonna be like, oh, I don't like this anymore.
Yeah.
It'll seemingly only make it a better product.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we wanted to talk CM Punk a little bit. So, do you think like this faction and what the current storylines are kind of going with? We have a tag match for a Saturday Night's main event between Sammy and Punk, or between the team of Sammy and Punk and versus Rollins and Bron. Do you think we eventually get to chapter 3 of CM Punk and Seth Rollins?
I think so, right? I mean, you know, what would make that really cool to me is, so regardless of if there's a title on the line, if you have a really good rivalry and you have one, two, three, it doesn't matter if there's a title. They did it with Drew and Punk, and there was no title the entire time. A good match is a good match, and a good rivalry is a good rivalry. So, but what would really elevate it is if, let's just say, the first two, as we already know, didn't have anything to do with the title, and they were both on a Monday Night Raw, which is cool. How do you really elevate that? Well, instead of a Raw, we're going to make it a PLE, and we're going to have a title on the line. So then it's like this really memorable. It was for a title. It was the third one. Like that could be really, really cool. The only thing as a Punk fan, the only thing that's been obnoxious is a strong word, but just a little annoying is, he's been back for what, 2.5, 3 years now, something like that. Time flies. He was hurt for a good chunk of it. The cool
Right.
thing was is he stayed on TV even when he was hurt, cutting promos and stuff. He's really only had two rivalries, two sets of matches. It was Drew and Seth, to some capacity. So I was sort of hoping that they would take the Cena route with him and just make him have some matches with other people. It's not that rivalries are a bad thing, but it's like, all right, yeah, I get it. He hates Seth. Like it just feels like it's dragging on a little bit, especially after Mania. After Mania, you assume, you're like, all right, how could they possibly further this? They have already found a way to keep that rivalry going.
Yeah.
You can only beat each other up so many times. They used to have these amazing microphone promo rivalries, and it was great. They were exchanging words, and it was emotional, it was real, and it was raw, and it was really cool. Now it just feels like, yeah, someone starts talking, the other one interrupts them, they brawl for a minute. Like you can only do that for so
Right.
long. So literally anyone, like, give me, it doesn't have to be a long-term rivalry. Just, it'd be cool to have Punk kind of venture off and just have a bunch of matches with people that he's never had a match with before. It's what he was doing when he first came back to AEW. In his first like 10 weeks, he had like 8 matches against people he's never faced. And that was the whole selling point of it. He was like, yeah, for the first time ever, Darby Allin. For the first time ever, Shawn Spears. So it'd be kind of cool if they took that route. It just feels like he's stuck in like rivalry hell almost, where it's just, so it's just getting a little stale. It's not that it's bad television,
Yeah.
but it's like, all right, if we could just do something else, literally anything,
Anything. Yeah, well, I'm kind of curious, the aftermath of Saturday Night's main event. I wonder if that could lead to something brief with him and Sammy. It's like they couldn't get on the same page, and yeah, there's that hatred, but it's like, dude, you said you have my back, something happens, and so they have a match or something, a couple weeks later or anything. And I feel like CM Punk to me, and I did not I was not watching WWE when his first run at all. And seeing this version of Punk in current WWE, I really regret not paying attention to WWE when Punk was around. But it's because I'm really enjoying him. I feel like he is one of those draws to where you advertise he's going to be on a Raw, you're going to sell that many extra tickets because people are going to want to kind of see Punk because I don't know how much longer we're going to see Punk. He's not exactly a young chicken anymore, but he's doing well. But that's why we see a lot more promos and appearances rather than just match after match after match with him. But yeah, no, I'm with you there. Let's see some other people. I had maybe we get him and Bron before we get to him and Seth. I'm afraid Bron might kill him literally. But maybe we get that before we get to him and Seth again. It's
Yeah, I mean, I'm biased. Obviously, I'm a Punk fan, but I'll go to my grave saying this. He gets a bigger pop than anybody on the roster. At this point, he's really not part-time. He's like between
no,
part-time and full-time. I don't know if he's doing house shows. He's not there every week, but he's there enough where he's definitely not part-time.
yeah, I consider
And
him full time for sure.
yeah, so it's cool. It's, he gets a huge pop. They present him in a really good way. He still cuts a great promo. I don't know statistically what the number is, but there was a stretch of time he was selling more merch than anybody else. So by its purest definitions, he's always been a draw. There's just he shifted characters a little bit in, his big run in 2011, 2012. He was the martyr, right? He was the guy that didn't like the establishment, wanted to
Mm-hmm.
make it better.
Mm-hmm.
So he really was like the martyr character. It was weird. The storyline where he was going to win the title, his contract ended, and he was going to just leave was amazing. To this day, it's probably the best storyline in since 2010 overall. And then when he goes to AEW, the fact that Punk's back after 7 years and people still chanted his name all that time when he was gone, it was a building ramp. He's ramping up to coming back, and he got a gigantic pop with the return. You look up top 5 WWE returns of all time, it's probably top 5.
It should, if it's not, it should be.
You're right, so he's an interesting character. You can do a lot with him. He is so expressive that it doesn't really matter if you put him in a match with JD McDonough, who, is great in his own regards, but he's no superstar.
Mm-hmm.
They would find a way to make that great,
Yeah.
So he's an interesting tool to have in your tool belt if you're trying to book shows,
Yeah, I feel like he can, he's that draw. You can give him good matches that don't necessarily always have to be on PLEs. You can, advertise he's going to have this match and it's going to, be a headliner, if not the main event of a Raw. And there's no problem with that because they're shifting away from having to have like all these big time matches on PLEs only. We're finally getting to where a title change might happen on Raw or SmackDown. And we're going to
I'm
have
waiting
these.
for it. It's been so long.
Yeah.
I would kill. They need to do it for so many reasons.
Yeah. Well, but they've been doing it with the secondary titles, but yeah, I feel like in the tag titles, but yeah, I think we're going to start seeing that soon. Hopefully, with maybe I don't know, maybe not the main titles, but I feel like it's close. It's almost there because they've been doing it with just about every other title.
Right. It's good for validity, when they, like I mentioned, 08, 09, 10, 11, 12, you would see a title change on a Monday Night Raw or a SmackDown, and it just kept things honest. It kept things interesting because you believed it. You were like, no, it could change hands tonight, versus now it's like, it's not going to. They've convinced you it won't. So you just know.
Yeah. So with CM Punk, do you have like a list of guys you're like, man, I want to see him have a match with this guy in the next year or two before before he calls it quits? Is there anybody that any kind of programs you would try to book with CM Punk?
Yeah, a lot of them are nostalgic based, which isn't great. You want to make him face guys that he's never faced, which is there's no that, but I really compare him to the Cena route where, it's not official he's in his final year, but you treat it that way.
Mhm.
You never know when it could be the last year. So, first thing that comes to mind is they were in the triple threat. Make him go one-on-one with Roman. He's the top guy, really cool. Have him face Cena one last time for nostalgic. Have him face Orton for nostalgic.
Mhm.
There's a lot of nostalgic type answers. Got, even Rey Mysterio, anyone that's been around that long. In terms of newer guys, though, I would love if they did. It would mostly be an AEW reference, but right before Punk left AEW, when he was running Collision as the booker. So the first 10 weeks of Collision's existence was awesome television. And they alluded to, they never really got into it because he left not long after, was Aleister Black. He was Malachi Black. So just their background, right? Lean guys, kickboxing kind of guys,
Mhm.
character driven guys. I think that'd be a really cool one, especially now that you have the opportunity to do that.
Yep. Yep.
So there's a couple ones that come to mind. I almost feel like I wish I had a list in front of me of the active roster. I'd be able to like pull them out. But there's a ton of things, right? A lot of nostalgic though, which I don't have anything wrong with that. People that say
Yeah.
keep it fresh, great, all the power to you. But it's like there's something really special about being like, oh my God, like Cena and Punk one more time on a Monday night or something, like stuff like that is really cool to me.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's. I want to ask about that one a little more specifically too. If you could nail a time, for having a, story has to be right, of course, and I feel, you know, WWE is doing a good job with storylines, whether they have to kind of hurry up a storyline, or not. I mean, Orton and Cena didn't have a lot of time to build from Mania, but they still did it well. They, again, as you mentioned earlier, they built it as last time between these two. So I mean that alone, captures people's attention and everything. But is there any PLE specific that you'd want to, or any kind of certain storyline you'd want to do to get to a Punk and Cena match one last time for them?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're going off right now, Cena the heel, and they continue that route of nostalgic matches, but reversed, right? Cena's the heel, the other guy's the face. Um, like I mentioned earlier, Money in the Bank makes a ton of sense. You could reference that previous rivalry, how it all came to blows at Money in the Bank. Punk is like unofficially Mr. Money in the Bank, right? I think he's the only guy that won 2 years in a row. And early on, when they were establishing it, he kind of took that torch. Um, so doing that would be great. And frankly, a match is awesome, right? That's what you want. That's what you build to. But even just a Punk Cena promo, right, where Punk comes out, and he's like, I always knew you were a fraud. Like, I called you out 10 years ago for it, and sure enough, you're a fraud. Like that stick battle would be amazing,
My word, yes,
and
yes.
that's the beauty with Punk, right? Not everybody is like that, but it almost feels like sometimes a promo battle is better than the match. It's like, because he has that skill where everything he says, you feel it,
Hmm.
and he's speaking right to you, and he's just good at building. The best thing with Punk, not to go off on a little side thing, but his matches are never amazing. He's not putting up 5-star matches anymore unless they're storyline driven. So
Right.
natural talent, he just doesn't have it anymore, which is fine. Neither does Orton. Cena's even slower. Like they're just not going to do that anymore. But what he does really well is he just understands the business. He knows what makes money. He
Yep.
knows what will sell tickets. He knows really good booking, which frankly, they've alluded to it a few times. It wouldn't shock me at all if when he calls it a quits in the ring, he is Shawn Michaels' assistant in NXT and then eventually takes it over. It wouldn't shock me
That'd
in
be
the
so
slightest
cool.
bit. So a lot of different ways you can go about some Punk and Cena matches, and this Rollins rivalry. It doesn't hit as hard as Drew, I mean, like the Drew rivalry, if you could go back and rewatch all of it, like like they were so convincing. You know,
Yes.
they were letting them off the leash a little bit. They were swearing, and it was just felt very real,
Hmm.
and there were so many examples of not real life hatred, but they provided you a reason why these guys hate each other. There's
Yep.
nothing worse in wrestling when you have to ask yourself, why are they in a match? Like what? Like with that, you were like, oh, these guys hate each other.
Yeah,
Like,
everything they did to each other made so much sense. So much sense.
yeah,
And I feel like Punk and Seth is going to be there. Like, let that simmer. Like you were kind of saying, let it simmer a little bit. Let this tag match here in a little over a week. Let it be the last thing that they kind of really touch for each other. It's like, 'cause I feel like especially if Punk and Sammy were to lose, and especially if it were to be like a Seth pinning Punk for them to lose, like that alone would be enough reason to be like, okay, now we're gonna separate with these guys a little bit, or at least separate Seth and Punk for a little bit, put Punk on his own journey, you know, But yeah, I would love to see like that's so perfect. I hope we see it now. I'd love to see Punk come out and just say, John, you finally proved me right.
yeah, it'd be great. And they that really I started watching like '07, '08, and one of my first memories was like HBK versus Chris Jericho. I think the first match I watched was Taker and Edge in a Hell in a Cell, somewhere right around there. So when 2011 rolled around, Punk was the first guy where I knew I liked it. Like I knew I was like, oh, I like watching this show. He was the first guy where I was like, I love this dude. Like this character is just so well made. He was the anti-hero. He was Deadpool. He was this place sucks. I'm saying things that even you as a fan agree with, and you can't help but side with me. And that pipe bomb promo really did it for me. I was like, I was so young, so maybe I was naive and kind of stupid, to be honest, because I was so young. I was like, this is real. They didn't allow him to do this, and he's doing this, and they cut his mic, and there was some truth to that. It was a work shoot where, yeah, we're gonna let you do it. I don't think they thought he was gonna go that far, and then from there it just catapulted him into this next level stratosphere.
Mhm. Well, and that's constantly referred to today, 13 years later. It's constantly referred to today. I mean, heck, Seth even did his version of it right before Mania, So, I mean, for something like that to still be referenced to today, meant it had a lasting impact. And sorry, this just popped in my head too to go off on a little bit rabbit trail too. I feel it's so interesting right now in current WWE, so many storylines circle back to 2011, 2014, that span where you had your Punk and a lot of these guys that were up and comers that are now the face of the industry or face of WWE. So many storylines centered around those guys from that long ago. When Orton and Cena are at their height, their prime, or so to speak. To me that's so interesting. And not being a big historian, but the fact that they can circle back, they're tying back to that stuff, or they're bringing that stuff up to enhance the storyline. That just every time they do that, I'm just like, oh, it's so cool they can do that, because I like it when you can reference stuff like that. Um, but yeah, when we started talking about back then, it's kind of like I said earlier, I wish I would have been watching it more then. I think I would I'd have a bigger love and even bigger understanding of it now. But it's cool to see those references, and it makes me kind of like you were saying with someone, I forget who, but it's like, oh, with Eddie, well, that makes me just want to kind of dive deeper into that. Why were they like that then? Why did they say that stuff back then? And yeah, it's a lot of fun. So it's really cool to see.
I think it's a win-win. I think it's a win-win from the writing standpoint. You're not insulting older fans because it's
Hmm.
like the elephant in the room, right? So if you have Cena Orton, and let's just say you've never referenced their history, you as the fan are like, what? Why are they treating me like I'm stupid? Like it's Cena Orton. And then the other side of the coin is they're taking newer fans or fans that are unaware of all that stuff, and they're making them go to the archives and they're making them watch more content,
when they can find it.
Right, exactly. Whenever they actually end up uploading 2011 somewhere, whether it's Peacock or Netflix, someone wake me up from my grave.
Yeah. We need some people on that. We need our viewers to get on that and figure what
Yeah, we need time to talk to someone upstairs.
Exactly. Yeah, we do. We do need to do that so much. Yeah, it's interesting. We can't find. I mean, I'm sure we could find it on YouTube, but yeah, it's very interesting. We've discussed this offline a few.
I want them neat. I want I like when things are neat. I like when season 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of 2011. I don't like going on YouTube and it's a part 1, part 2, part 3. It's blurry. I need them neat. I need everything neat in one place. It's like a comfort thing. I'll throw it on an episode of 2009 as I'm falling asleep because I don't know.
All right, everybody heard Joe. Let's get this figured out for Joe. Let's make this happen.
Sick of it, man. Get all your crap together, man. You're a billion-dollar company. Let me see my content.
Right. Well, any final thoughts on just wrestling as it is right now for WWE? There's a lot of really good storylines. I don't know if there's any final thoughts you had on anything we have talked about, haven't talked about. Any final thoughts on CM Punk? You are my CM Punk expert over here, so.
Yeah, so my final thoughts are a bit of a curveball, actually. It's to give credit where credit's due. So happy to talk WWE content. It's never been better. They never made more money. Actually, I shouldn't say never been better, but it's at a place that's better than 2019, 2020. They were in a pretty dull space, so they're right on track. They're continue to doing great things, and a lot of that, in fact, probably 90% of that is Triple H, right? So, however, my final thoughts are I've actually been tuned back into AEW recently, and they've put on a string of awesome shows after months of bad television. And it's like any young company. You have bad television, good television. My final thoughts are if you get a chance, tune into Wednesday nights because Dynamite is on like an 8 or 9 game win streak. I went to see him in Boston. I think I mentioned it last time we were talking. By this point, it was probably 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. And it feels like from that point on, they've just had a really good set of shows.
Cool.
And it's like just one of those credit where credit's due kind of thing.
Yeah.
I tune in and out of them. There's months where I don't watch. I'll hear some good things and I'll watch, then I don't watch. Been watching the last like 6 weeks, and it's just everything's very organized. They're finally at a point where they have some structure. So that's my final thoughts. AEW's on a bit of a good run lately.
Good, and that's great to hear. I'm not a fan, or I don't like them or dislike them. It's kind of I consume a lot as it is, so it's hard for me to consume AEW at the moment. I'll kind of stick with storylines, especially if they revolve around old WWE guys. We watched what was that back in like 2019 or 2020 that was that an All In that we went to, or that we
saw Revolution.
Revolution, yeah.
We saw Revolution 23. No, 22. I think it was 22.
Yeah. I can remember. And I enjoy the heck out of that, but it's a I wish I had more time to consume it. I'll catch highlights here and there. But then you said, yeah, I'll tune into. Tyler and I have talked about this before. The whole. I think someone from AEW kind of went on a rant. I think the other day, the whole I like one, don't like the other. I personally, there's room for both. They both I think are good for each other. If one steps up, that pushes the other to figure out a way to step it up, and they both prioritize different things. WWE right now is prioritizing good long-term storytelling, not just match. They can here and there, but that's not what they're trying to get as their bread and butter. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like AEW is kind of a little bit of different, where long-term storytelling isn't a big strength of theirs, but they know how to put on just epic matches, and they'll kind of go. They're not afraid to get brutal. They're not afraid to get bloody with their matches. I remember a picture of this is probably 2 months ago now of Moxley. Just having that bat. I don't know if it was a bat or what it was, but literally ripping his skin off as they took it out of him because it got put into him so hard. Oh, that's not for the
Yeah,
queasy,
yeah,
But I
no,
feel like the brutality
you're
there is a little bit more on the AEW side.
you're spot on. Yeah, you're spot on. They just prioritize different things. And the best description I was given, or I think I read it somewhere, I can't remember, was obviously they're worlds apart financially, place in society. One is 5 years old, one is, 70, whatever, something like that. So they're worlds apart. One is Walmart, one is like your local mom and pop shop kind of thing. But whether it's subconscious or even conscious, even though they're worlds apart, you could make the case that a lot of the recent WWE success was not so much feeling the heat of AEW, like they're creeping up on them, but you have competition, whether small or large. You do have another guy in town, and it does maybe subconsciously force you to put on a better product, think a little bit harder, really think about things, not because you're worried they're going to take over, because they won't, but that they're right there, just kind of in the background. So it's great. The biggest takeaway is the more the merrier, right? We live in this world where there's too much content. And if you can have a second company that is really, really good, and they're easily accessible, they're on cable too, it's not like you have to buy a channel just to see them,
right?
Then great.
And they're recently streaming on Max now, I think, too. So
yeah, so they did in their own kind of way. They make moves. They're not going to Saudi Arabia, they're not doing an 80,000 show every couple of months, but in their own kind of way, they do things that you're like, oh, good for them. That's really cool.
Yeah, and they still have their couple big events. I know All In is obviously, I think they're is it All In or All Out? But one of those I think is their WrestleMania equivalent. I know they have a couple big tentpoles every
more
year.
Or less.
I know they seem to do a lot of stuff in London. I think kind of just the last name connection is part of that there, but it's, again, for me, I need more hours a day so I can consume it more, but I don't mind it. I don't, there's no reason to separate the two. People are going to like both for different reasons. I keep up with it, again, just because of former WWE wrestlers. And I think it's cool that they have the, was it Forbidden Door? Is that what I'm so horrible on some of this stuff. Forbidden Door, where they do the New
that's
Japan.
One of my favorite shows. Yeah,
I think that's awesome that they have that crossover with that. They've Ring of Honor's under them now. I feel like some of that stuff, I don't think we would ever see what we've just seen recently with WWE, where they have the contract of NXT and TNA crossing over talent on both. I don't think we would ever seen Vince, and I haven't seen that in the Vince era, and I definitely don't think we would have seen in the Vince era WWE buying something like AAA, the Luchador, one of the Luchador ones, so that's a whole nother topic. I definitely, we could talk about sometime, but
that's a good tease. That's a good. See, if I was a producer, I would have written that in there.
I should have. Yes, I should have. Should take notes from you. This is why you always had that role, and I was in front of you. But yeah, I think stuff that AEW is doing has triggered that in Triple H. It's like, well, who else is out there? Who can we partner with? Not to maybe the same extent, but they're doing a joint event. I think already Money in the Bank weekend. I think AAA is doing their Worlds Collide.
Yep.
One place in LA, and Money in the Bank's later in the day at another place in LA. So it's like they already have like a partnership going and stuff like that. So I'm very curious to where a lot of that goes, but I think without AEW, the WWE would have never probably went down that road. Probably went down a lot of roads. Right. So yeah, competition is always healthy.
Well, it just definitely keeps things healthy, so that's nice. Though, if you're wondering, those were my final thoughts.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And I really do. I've always liked that. You've had that perspective of AEW and always kind of help me. You and Tyler helped me keep clued in to AEW a little bit. So I always appreciate that. Well, that's all our time for today, Joe. Again, I appreciate doing this with me. To tease something else, we are going to try to coordinate getting you back in with, or actually trying to get all four of us back together again right before Money in the Bank to do another just roundtable picks and predictions podcast with all four of us if we can work it out. But that is the plan, to do something like that. So everybody stay tuned for that. Again, thank you, Joe, for joining me. Please like the video, leave your comments on anything we've talked about. We've talked about a lot in this one. Backlash, Heyman, Rollins, and Bron Breakker, CM Punk, AEW. Would love to hear just any of the thoughts you have on this. So please leave those in the comments below. And thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you later.